The screen is not the problem. Today it's the screen, tomorrow your child may be involved in a peer group that has a bad influence. We are products of our parents, but it is very, very important for us to assess what kind of a parent we want to be.
It may not be enough to tell your child that I love you, because unless the entire peer group loves you, it's not good enough.
You need to have authoritative parenting, which is a balance, and it's the right form of parenting, balance between nurturing and discipline. To start looking at what is good about people and not really finding what is wrong with them.
Joining me on Nature and Nurture today is Piya Marker, who is a parenting coach who's been in the business of education for the last 25 years, was the founding principal of a special needs school, currently engaged in coaching parents of children of all ages. Welcome to Nature and Nurture, Piya.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's begin with what is currently in discourse, and a lot of people are talking about this Netflix series called Adolescence, mostly from the perspective of the teenager. But from you, what I want to understand this entire conversation around raising adolescents the right way from the perspective of a parent. What is your take on this series? First of all, let's hear it out from you.
So I think this has easily been one of the most talked about series. You're seeing it everywhere, you're hearing about it everywhere, and clearly the bad guy has come out being the screen. My take on it is a little bit different, because yes, the screen is a huge influence. Our children have it at their fingertips, but the screen is not the problem, right? Today it's the screen, tomorrow your child may be involved in a peer group that has a bad influence. I think the crux of adolescence, and I think it comes together beautifully in the last episode, is when parents actually recount signs and signals that they ignored. When they saw that their child had underlying rage, or their child had strong views about women, how those strong views, if they were not healthy views, were not guided or nurtured to think of it in a more positive way. And I think the unresolved anger, the unresolved issue, and the parents themselves who carry their own burden of being children. And the father says that, I didn't want to hit my child because I was beaten, and I promised myself I would never do that.
So he thought he was doing everything right. And despite that, they are actually stunned. They cannot believe that their own child
has taken such a drastic step.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here the father's whole goal is, I don't want to be like my parents. But I think the reality of parenting for all of us as parents is that we are products of our parents. But it is very, very important for us to assess what kind of a parent we want to be. There's a lot of good and bad that comes from our childhood, and every parent does what they think is right. But it's important for us to not ignore the signs or go in the complete opposite direction, right? So maybe your parent hit you and you don't want to hit your child, which is fantastic. Nobody should hit their child. But discipline is still required. Guidance is still required. Influencing your child to make the right decisions, that is still required. We can't go hands off and say that, my parents were too strict, so I'm going to allow my child to do everything.
You don't have to go diametrically opposite.
Absolutely not. That's very dangerous, actually.
Okay. So I'll tell you what I thought of it, Piya. When I saw this series, one thing that struck me about adolescent boys, and I'm raising a teenage boy myself. What I saw is that they do look for validation from girls. So that incel culture thing came in about involuntary celibacy. I had not even heard this term until then. So the boys are going through this process of seeking acceptability, validation, not just peer group, particularly women. And therefore that whole, thing about that triggered his anger, and, that boys within their own circle have a certain hierarchy. Those who are wanted more, wanted less, not wanted at all. So do you, in your experience of counseling parents, seen this pattern here in India as well, or is it a very first world
honestly, I think it's a human thing, because I think that we all thrive on validation, on social acceptance, and I think any person who says they don't, it's not possible, right? We are social animals, and how people perceive us, our standing in a social structure is important, and this begins at a middle school level actually. So once children enter middle school, it's actually the hardest for them. Because middle school is when they start understanding what is my position in in the school setup, in the peer group. Am I popular? Am I unpopular? Do I influence my peers? Do I get left out? There's so much, and then children, by the time they reach their senior school or their high school years, are pretty sure of who they are. And that's when it starts with the need for validation from the opposite sex. And it's the same for the girls. It's not that it's only a boy related thing. It's also
for the
it's also for
girls,
girls that you slowly your influences change. When you're very little, it's your parent, then it becomes your teacher, then it becomes your friends, and now it becomes the opposite sex. So it's also extremely important for us to equip our children with understanding, things like boundaries, sexual experimentation, because those are conversations I think we need to have with our children. We can't be sitting there like ostriches with our heads in the mud saying, you know what, no, my child's not going
but
to.
how can a parent come in here, Piya? I want to understand this, because you're saying, okay, don't blame the screen alone. The peer group influence, peer group acceptability is very high in their minds at this age. So how can a parent then help a child if already the child is, by virtue of the fact that you're an adolescent, under the influence of this, validation from peers? Where do parents come in?
I think parents have to really focus on connection with their child, okay? Because your child loves you because you're their parent, but love is not enough for a relationship to actually be healthy. You need to be able to influence each other, and that will happen when you actually have a more democratic approach with your child. When you're talking to your child, you understand where they are coming from. You understand how their peer group functions. It's conversations. A lot of parents say that,
But it may not be enough to tell your child that I love you, because unless the entire peer group loves you, it's not good enough. Parent loving them, accepting them is like a given. It's like taken for granted. That is not what they're seeking. So how can a parent convince an adolescent that what you are seeking out there is not something that should disturb you or derail you or, mentally disturb you in any way?
See, this is not something that happens overnight, right? How our children feel about themselves is not something that just happens one fine day when they're an adolescent. It's how you make them feel from the time they're very little, how connected they feel to you as a family, how connected they feel to themselves. And that is very important, right? Like how your
That a
child,
parent can instill, you feel?
a parent should instill, and I think we have tons of opportunities along our child's journey to instill those values in our children. And it should not be at a superficial level or at a level where you're just constantly praising your child and telling them the good things, because children are very, very perceptive to us being authentic or not being authentic. So you need to be able to be that true mirror for your child and show your child that, okay, fine, maybe your peer group's rejecting you, but it doesn't start at adolescence. You may have seen signs of maybe your child not being able to blend well with a peer group, maybe your child is too dominant, maybe your child's a bully, maybe your child is too passive, maybe your child's a people pleaser. You need to see all those social traits and guide your child.
So you're saying the parents also must have some understanding, some influence over choosing the peers? Or
No, we can't choose the peers, right? Because we can only choose the peers when they are little.
Because that the kid normally resists. They don't like it if you
and honestly,
sort of start
it's not real. It's not real.
Yeah,
it's not possible.
Yeah.
Because children choose their own peers. And I've seen that with my own children, right? So initially when they are smaller, our friends' kids become their friends. But as they grow older, yes, some of them stay their friends, but they start finding people who are more like them.
Yeah.
And as you grow up, you sometimes grow up and grow apart. So somebody who was your kindergarten buddy is no longer your friend. There is that fondness because you've spent a quantity of time, but the actual connect is not there.
And that's a process probably, moving from those who your parents introduced
of course,
to finding.
And that's very healthy, to be honest.
Yeah.
And if your child sticks with only those you pick for them, I think you need to take a step back and reassess whether your child is able to think for themselves, whether your child actually knows who they are in order to kind of reach out to people who are like themselves or who complement them in some ways.
But am I understanding you correctly that at least as a parent you should know who they're hanging out
you
with?
You 100% have to know. I'm constantly hearing we should let them be, we should give them privacy, we should, honestly, I don't think you should give the child privacy beyond a point. Yes, I'm not saying you need to go through their phones and snoop on their conversations, but your child needs to know that there are certain boundaries which they cannot cross, and there have to be conversations where you will be checking on their whereabouts. At 13 and 14, they're too young to kind of have an independent life.
So not dominate, but at least be aware of their peer group and the influences, because
you need to know exactly.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question about to what extent do you dictate terms? Because there are indulgent parents, like you said, I let them be, and there are parents who are controlling parents. Permissive parent and non-permissive parent. So all this labeling that goes around, what is the right approach, Piya?
I think middle path is always the best. Okay, so there are all sorts of parenting. There's permissive parenting, which is one extreme where you allow your child to do anything, they figure it out. You have lack of boundaries, it's very child driven. Then you have authoritarian parents, where it's my way or the highway. And to be honest, neither works. You need to have authoritative parenting, which is a balance, and it's the right form of parenting, balance between nurturing and discipline, because that's what children need as well. Okay, so you need to kind of guide your child, nurture your child. That's your purpose actually as a parent, right? You've given birth to this being, and it's for you to kind of use your experience as an adult to kind of show them how they should best navigate, things.
Yeah, the other question that keeps coming up is that should you be a friend, should you not be a friend? Like I'm not a friend to my child. I can't be. I'm
You're
a
not your
parent.
child's friend, you're your
Yeah.
child's parent.
Are you supposed to be a friend, or you, because again that confusion
See,
about how
friendship
do I
is an equal, right? I am friends with you because you are my equal, and we have the same likes, dislikes, interests, whatever it may be that gets two friends together. And friendship, for it to be healthy, has to be an equal friendship. You can't have one person bullying the other and the other person just going along. It's not going to last. It needs to be equal, mutual respect, mutual understanding, where opinions are shared. Now, when it comes to a parent and a child, you cannot be their friend, because at the end of the day, there are
So no
some
point killing
things.
ourselves that I am my
You're
child's
not.
best friend.
You
or
have to be-
daughter's best friend. That doesn't work in exact.
You
those
have to
terms.
be your child's safe place. You have to be your child's perhaps secret keeper. You have to be your child's guide, but you can't be their friend. They should be able to come to you and share their fears or share
As a
their
confidant.
doubts as a confidant, but it's not necessarily as a friend. Because with a friend, what happens is then your child says, I don't want to do it. And you're supposed to, if with your friend tells you, I don't want to do something, you're going to say, okay, fine, what do you want to do? Right? But with your child, sometimes you have to make the decision, and sometimes you have to make the call. And parents actually oscillate between the two. Oh, I'm my child's best friend. When your child is pushing back, you tell your child, shut up, I'm the parent.
Yeah.
And then the
So
kid
there's the
pushes back.
consistency.
So then
Yeah.
there is that. So you have to tell your child that I am always going to be there for you, be a fun person, be a safe person, be somebody who can guide. Your child knows something goes wrong, I can go to mom or dad, right? And they will help me in this situation, even get me out of a tight spot, right? They'll be there. They are my cover, they are my guide, they are my safe place, whatever it may be. But there are times that you are going to say, you know what, I'm sorry, you can't do this.
So you do that, Piya. Like as a parent, what I do and what I have seen in my journey is that I'll tell you that, listen, kid, don't take that way. There's a ditch out there. You are likely to fall. So take this way. But the child sometimes will still go by their own mind and say they'll still take that road and they will fall. And then also you have to be the person to tell your child, even after you fall, you come back to me, right?
Absolutely.
And then I don't tell you, see, I told you so. Then you have to be with them, and maybe later they understand it themselves. But to exercise that I told you so, and next time listen to me, and the threat and the that whole intimidation starts, that perhaps can be cut out. Do you feel?
100%. So these
A lot of parents
I
threaten
tell
their
a lot
children.
of parents that the 3 words you should never tell your child is I told you so. Because when I tell you I told you so, immediately what happens, it becomes I'm right, you're wrong. Point 1 for me, point 0 for you. And it becomes about winning and losing. And it's not, right? If our kids lose, we lose. When they win, we win. So it's just about, you don't even need to say
There
those
should be a
words.
one-upmanship there.
Because, honestly, you don't need to say it. If the kid has done what you've told them not to and they have fallen, they know.
They already know.
They
So
already
no
know. So
point
there's no
rubbing
point
it in.
rubbing it in. And what you need to do in that moment is say, okay, now let's say you're in that same situation again. What are you going to do differently? So what is the purpose of that? What is the purpose of life actually? For us to learn from our mistakes. I tell my children all the time, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because you're only going to learn from your mistakes. When things go well, actually, we don't really process it. We take it for granted. We don't really think, okay, what did I do right? It's when you get that sum wrong in math, is when you're going to never forget that sum again, and you're going to get it right the next time. You're not going to focus on all the 10 sums you got right. You take that for granted, right? So we need to teach our children not to be afraid of losing, afraid of making mistakes, and we should definitely not rub their mistakes in their face.
Indian parents, again, I am looking at it as a different breed because I do see typical characteristics. So correct me if I'm wrong. I see that mothers mostly take their children as if they are these projects that they are working on. And then, later, in every single choice, career choice, partner choice, the mother feels that I am the overriding authority, because after all, you are a project that I worked on. I made you what you are. So today, who you're going to marry will also have, a significant amount of, a say and authority from my side. Do you see that pattern as well in most Indian parents? Now I'm talking about kids when they grow up and they are now making choices for partners, etc.
So I think a lot of Indian parents, and I think Indians in general, we are very, very, I think coming from our caste system and going all the way back to that, there's a lot of hierarchy. And what people are not ready for, I feel, in India is how to be at a higher position and yet not be in a dominant place, if you know what I mean. Like I'm my child's parent, I'm in a higher position, but it is not my job to rule their lives. Right? And I should be secure in my position and not threatened that if my child is doing something that I have told them or not doing what I've suggested, it shakes my position. And I think that's where Indian parents come from.
Yeah.
That, oh my God, how can you say that to me? I am the parent. I am the adult. You listen to me because it's my house. It's my money. And these things don't work. Because on one hand, we are all as parents today empowering our children. Okay? There's a lot of influence of gentle parenting, positive parenting, different parenting styles that everyone is aware of today, right? Our parents did not know and their parents did not know either. It just came instinctually and you just did what came naturally to your personality. Today, parents are investing a lot in learning about themselves, learning about the right parenting techniques. So what happens is that, you start, like you said, thinking of a child as this project. I have to take them from point A to point B and they're going to look like this when they reach point B. And our children are again not AI generated products, okay? A lot of times they're going to be very different from what you planned. As long as you have a few basic values in place that you want your child to kind of have and you're guiding them to those.
Yeah,
that
because
the
sentiment that I see is that I woke up at 5 a.m. for 20 years for you, I raised you, and today you've gone and chosen your own life partner without even bothering about how I would feel about this
selfish.
choice.
I think that's just selfish.
Do you see that? Because I see that a lot.
Yeah, of course I see that a lot.
Yeah.
That I've done so much for you and this is still what you're doing. So
this is what you do to me. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of Indian parents, it becomes about it becomes about me. Because I think a lot of women also in India typically don't work.
Yeah.
Right? Their whole life is their home. So that I can understand that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You feel betrayed. Like, I've done so much. And you have to think of it that, my job is what to finally let that bird fly out of the cage. Right? It's not about moving the cage from a steel cage to a golden cage. Right? The idea is for our children to fly and spread their wings. So if that starts coming into the mindset of the Indian parent, then when they open that cage and let their kid fly, they feel happy and proud that, okay, you know what? I am the one who helped my child make such a fabulous choice. My child, I've put in so many values and my child could make a choice. Yeah. And my child made a good choice.
But maybe it's difficult for a parent to accept, especially when
it's very hard.
Your child is now going to be attached to another human. So that transition is perhaps very difficult for mothers, perhaps,
So I think that's the whole mother-in-law, daughter-in-law conversation that maybe we can have another time.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, when you said it's important to have the difficult conversation. One of the things that come up is about talking about birds and bees. When do I talk to my child about puberty, about the hormonal changes and sexual desires that are going to come in and attraction towards the opposite sex? What is the right time and what is the right approach?
So I think the right time to start speaking to your child about sex is for when they start understanding the word, right? And when I say word, is just any word in communication. So when you start teaching your child about their body, this is your nose, this is your eyes, this is your ears, as small as a child is 2 or even younger, that's when sex education actually begins. We tend to say, no, don't talk about that. If let's say your child is scratching their nose, you're not going to freak out. But if your child is touching their private part publicly, your reaction is so large that your child starts thinking, okay, this is something that is something I should not be talking about. So we tend to kind of hide conversations and hide things. And as our children are growing up, they are exposed to multiple things. And the difference between us and our children is children have at their fingertips today, because of their phones, porn, right? Social media, they have TV shows and they're not watching things that are age appropriate. All children are not watching things that are 7+. They're not interested in those things anymore. They watch things that are above their age rating. So it's important for us as parents to have conversations, knowing what our children are consuming on screen, what the right approach should be to dealing with the opposite sex, with themselves, what boundaries are, what
Because you
safety
want your
is.
influence to matter, not something else.
Correct.
That
So,
is
like when we were
influencing.
growing up, maybe most of my friends, all had maybe boyfriends or girlfriends in junior college. It was not a thing to have a boyfriend or girlfriend in school. Today, children in school, as young as 12 and 13, already have boyfriends and girlfriends, and this whole dating concept has come in, which is it's an it's an adult concept. It's come down as young as this. So we can have two approaches. We can say, no, 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 this is not your age. Don't talk about it. It doesn't take away the feelings that they are having. It doesn't take away the exposure or the romanticized concept that they have about relationships. So we need to talk to our children about these things, about what safety means to them. Like, what boundaries are, how they need to be safe in relationships, how they have the right to say no, how they have the right to say stop, like what is okay, what is not okay, reputation, repercussions, so many conversations that need to be
maybe
had.
even consent, because
Consent is huge. That's something you need to say no, and that you can say no. You do not have to say yes just because.
and works for both genders.
It's for both genders. This always, I think everyone thinks the girl needs to be taken care of, but I think it's for both. It's both genders. Boys are equally vulnerable, to relationships and to being exploited or whatever it may be.
So those difficult conversations for every parent, I'm sure it's one of those phases which is a difficult phase. How to breach that barrier, so to speak, which we have with our children, and actually talk about birds and bees and talk about sex. I want to then come to the other aspect of the neurodivergent kids, children with special needs. Since you were the principal of one of the founding schools for special needs children, are the challenges very different for a parent there?
Absolutely. Right. So the challenges are very different because, you have to actually find what your child can do. And every child can do something, that's for sure. So I think the main challenge for parents, who have children who are neurodivergent, is breaking that stigma or that embarrassment, right? So it's very, very hard for them to kind of make a place in society because people are so judgmental. Or
So before
everybody
dealing with the child, dealing with your own feelings also.
Absolutely,
is the
because
first
for
thing.
everyone, okay, you're a mom, I'm a mom, we know when you have your child, I mean, the first thing you dream of when you are pregnant is, what kind of a child is going to be, you imagine how they're going to look and things you're going to do together. And then when you have a child who has difficulties, a lot of those dreams are broken. So it's very important for everybody to be empathetic about that. And for a parent to say, what, okay, this is the challenge I've got, and now what can I do about it? Right? So there are a lot of parents who kind of are unable to move beyond, they are ashamed of their children. But I think it's important for all parents to kind of be empathetic towards each other. For us as parents of children who are neurotypical, to teach our children how to be inclusive, to teach our children how not to make fun of somebody who's not able to do something as well as you can, to be kind, to the kinds of words that you use. Today, children, when they speak to each other and they're using terms, they'll say, oh, you're so retarded. Or why are you behaving so autistic? And you have to teach your child that those are not words that you use loosely. Those are not words that you use as curse words towards somebody. So I think it's important.
So you're saying all parents have a responsibility towards neurodivergent children, not just parents.
100%. And I feel that parents of neurotypical parents have more responsibility, right? Because those parents are struggling to kind of make their kids do normal stuff like reach milestones, eating, walking, talking, socializing, which comes naturally to a lot of our children, right? We don't need to do that. It's just a normal part. We don't think about it. So while they are going through that and they have a lot of supportive therapies or whatever, I think our role as neurotypical parents is to teach our children how to be inclusive, to be kind, to allow that differences in people and to start looking at what is good about people and not really finding what is wrong with them.
Yeah, I think that acceptability and willingness to accept differences, accept variety in children. Neurodivergent kids also offer a certain variety of different nature
Absolutely.
of children that they're going to meet later in life. So in a way, it's also an opportunity for parents to probably teach their children. You're going to meet human beings of all shapes, of all hues, and of all kinds of nature. Can I then also ask you a question around how do parents, and this is a nightmare for any parent, to even think that a child can get abused in school or anywhere in an outside environment. We have heard terms like good touch, bad touch being, taught in school. And there was a recent case, Pia, I want to tell you, where a child confided in with the grandfather that such a thing was happening in school, and then the parents got into action and figured that there was somebody abusive in school. So are these methods that we are using good enough, or there is more that needs to be done to
I think,
identify?
like I said, conversations are very, very important. I'm finding a lot of parents say things like they'll figure it out. I mean, what is there to talk to our child about? We figure it out, they'll figure it out. And I feel that, I think parenting is a very personal approach, but I think the best or the safest way is to equip yourself and your child with knowledge and information. The minute you have the knowledge that, okay, this is something that is not okay, like a person cannot touch my body without my permission, or a person cannot make, and this is how it makes you feel uncomfortable. What abuse looks like. Abuse is never done by a stranger, right? You're not walking on the street and somebody just abuses you. It's always somebody who's gained your trust, somebody who's made you feel comfortable in a situation when you've let your guard down. So having conversations with children to let them know that if you at any point feel like this, experimentation,
even from your trusted circle,
even your friends, experimentation is such a normal thing, even between siblings, unfortunately, right? There is experimentation that happens between siblings, experimentation that happens between friends. You may have even a grandparent or a parent who's the abuser. So even telling your child that, whoever it is, you need to say stop and you need to report it and we will trust you. What tends to happen if it is an inconvenient person being the abuser, parents always shun the child away, right? So it's important to keep that conversation open about boundaries, about safety, about consent.
That is a big concern in this country, and like you said, there are abusers within your immediate circle and never gets detected, and the child goes through for years on and adds to the trauma, etc. Where do you stand on this issue about how childhood trauma translates to what a person goes through in a relationship later in life?
I think we are all products of our experiences, right? So I think your childhood trauma, of course, we carry that baggage with us. So it's very, very important for parents to actually do a lot of work on themselves, because you need to understand that why am I parenting like this? Okay, so let's say, to give you an example, you had a parent who was very kind and allowed you to do whatever you wanted. And when you grew up, you realize that, I made all those mistakes, or I did all those things because my parent allowed me to. Sometimes you think back and you're like, I wish my parent was a little bit more firm. Okay, we need to actually stop and introspect and understand that if today I'm going to be a parent, what am I going to take with me and what am I going to do differently? So I think it's very, very important for parents to do work on themselves, to understand that am I parenting my child from a place of pain? Am I parenting my child from a place of guilt? Am I parenting my child because I don't want to be like my parent? Am I trying to be too much like my parent? I think a lot of introspection and self-work is very, very important, because at the end of the day, I think the only legacy we leave behind is our children.
You said something very important, that when you feel that you win this friendship and likability from your children because you are being indulgent, but later on they might say, I wish my parents were a little bit more firm with me. So that's a good lesson for parents who think they're doing a great job because the kids love them and they are permissive. The same children may later on actually
have regrets.
Have regrets that parents were not as firm. My last question to you, Piya, around nature and nurture, since we call this nature and nurture, and I would like to go back to the adolescence series that we spoke about. Are children wired a certain way, comes in the DNA, nothing much that nurturing can do, or you are of the belief that there's lots that environment and nurturing can change, even if a child is predisposed to certain kind of a nature?
Okay. So I think what's important is your nature is, I think, who you are. It's like saying that, I have this plant. Okay, the nature of a banyan tree is very different from the nature of this indoor plant that's here. So it's important for you to say, what kind of plant is my child? All right, that is the nature. And now how do I nurture it? Right?
So an apple tree will have apples. It can't get mangoes.
No,
so that you have to accept.
Correct. But now let's say the apple tree is not, bearing the fruit of the apple like it should be. You need to figure out what's going on. Is there something wrong with the roots? Is there something wrong with the soil? Is there some kind of parasite on this tree that's preventing it from thriving, right? So that's where nurture comes in, where we need to look at our child objectively.
Yeah, but they
without
don't
emotion.
expect that there will be mangoes in it. That sometimes parents do.
No, there's not going to
There's
be
comparison.
No,
look
my
at
child
that.
has to be the best apple tree if he is an
Yeah,
apple tree.
correct.
Right? So your goal as a parent is to make your child the best apple tree, where they are, bearing fruit that is healthy, good quality, things like that.
That's your role as a parent.
That's your role
not
as a parent.
to change the very nature,
No,
comparing with
you
something.
can't
That's very
change
important.
you can't change the basic nature.
DNA,
But now when there are things that are not really good in our children, and all of us are good and bad, right? So let's say your child has a passive aggressive nature or is angry, like this child in adolescence had, right? He had unaddressed rage. So what happens is that a lot of children are bullied, a lot of children are rejected by the opposite sex, a lot of children are treated badly, a lot of children have all sorts of parents, but not everyone will take a knife and stab you to death, right? So what makes one do that and one not is when you see your child is unable to kind of, apportion their reactions to the trigger. So there are children, in fact, there are some children I know of who, let's say somebody put a drop of water on them. Their reaction is what? They take an entire bottle and pour it on you. So they are not able to kind of manage the embarrassment, the rejection. Oh my God, you did this to me, so I'm going to do 10 times worse to you. Somebody will push you, you'll take a hard bat and whack somebody. So you need to think
The
about,
proportion.
is the proportion right? Is my child reacting proportionally? Are they able to control that rage and that ego and that anger? And I think that's what happens in adolescence, when the parents are actually thinking about the fact that they should have addressed so many things, but they ignored it, thinking it's
So
a
there's
phase.
no child born with a criminal mindset or anything like that. Everything
that-
can be addressed, and
There are some children who do have maybe negative wiring in the brain, and they could have a criminal mindset. But when you see it, you are going to have to work doubly hard as a parent, if that's your challenge, to kind of work with your child, directing them in the right way, giving them the right influences. You do have that job. So
I understand. I mean, I think that's again the primary point that you made in this entire conversation about having conversations, the difficult ones as well. At least you know. Don't be ignorant.
Don't
of
be
what-
ignorant.
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
that's a very fabulous.
And even
point.
conversations with yourself about who am I and how am I contributing to this, right? Because we are not just raising children like cattle.
Yeah, because that's the first step. Unless you know, how will you even address it? So
Of
the
course.
knowing part can only come through that connect, through the
Conversations.
through building that rapport. And that's my biggest takeaway from the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Piya
much
Marker,
for having
joining
me.
And it's beautiful because yes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but like Piya Marker here says, you can nourish the plant, you can make it blossom. Thanks for watching Nature and Nurture.